Welcome to the Nutritional Revolution podcast. I'm your host, Kyla Chanel. I'm a performance nutritionist specializing in sex differences in sport. I work with athletes from all over the world through my online private practice and sports nutrition programs. We here at Nutritional Revolution are here to cut through the BS promoted in the media and give you the science, literally straight from the research articles, as well as share client success stories and experiences around nutrition and racing. Please keep in mind, this podcast is created strictly for educational purposes only and should never be used as a replacement for medical diagnosis and treatment. If you like what you hear today, we would love for you to subscribe and share. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Nutritional Revolution podcast. This is Kyla Chanel, your host, and today we have you guys a returning guest for the third time, Adam Kimble, and he is a professional ultrarunner, race director, motivational speaker, and running coach from Truckee, California. In 2016, Adam ran 2,500 miles over the course of 60 days to cross the USA on foot. Subsequently, in November of 2016, he successfully completed a 60-day journey alone in the wilderness of South America to become winner of Discovery Channel's survivalist show, The Wheel. Following that adventure, Adam set two prominent fastest known times, FKTs. In 2017, he became part of the first duo to ever run self-supported on foot across Great Britain, Scotland, England, and Wales, while summiting the highest peak in each country along the way. And in 2020, he set the supported FKT on the Tahoe Rim Trail, a 171-mile circumnavigation of Lake Tahoe. In 2025, Adam finished fourth overall and ran one of the top 10 fastest times ever at the historic Badwater 135. And this year in 2026, he's won the Badwater Cape Fear 50K, the historic American River 50 mile, and the Outlands Endurance Races 50K. He most recently towed the line at Cocodona 250, where he unfortunately DNF'd, and we talked to Adam about that journey, as sometimes our DNFs can provide the greatest insight into what we need to do next. Adam's life mission is to push himself past his perceived limits and achieve the impossible. His calling is to share what he has learned and help others grow in their journey so as to push through the ceiling and achieve their own impossible. This is always a fantastic and fun episode whenever Adam's here. Loved it. Always learn a lot. So enjoy the episode. Hey, you guys, before we get into the episode today, I want to tell you something I'm really excited about. On June 2nd at 5 p.m. Pacific, I'm sitting down live with professional ultra runner Danny Moreno, and I want you in the room. We're calling it Fueling for Success, and here's why I think this one's going to be really special. Danny's heading into Broken Arrow 64K at the end of June, right in the heart of summer race season. And if you're gearing up for something big yourself, whether that's your own A race or something like Western States, this is the conversation you want to be a part of. We're going to talk about how Danny's fueling ahead of a key mountain race, how she handles hydration and gut training at the pro level, how she navigates recovery and injury setbacks, and what actually shifts in her nutrition when race season gets close. But honestly, the biggest appeal here is access. This is your front row seat to speak directly to a professional ultra runner and ask her your personal questions. Not a panel, not a webinar where you're muted the whole time. This is a real conversation with Danny, and I'll be there too, sharing how we've worked together from the sports nutrition side. So you're also getting a peek behind the curtain of what an athlete and nutritionist relationship actually looks like in practice. When you reserve your spot, you can also submit your questions ahead of time so we can make sure they get answered. We're capping this at only 15 people. That's intentional. This is meant to be intimate. Early bird pricing right now is $67 and it goes up after that. So don't sit on this one, you guys. Grab your spot. The link is in the show notes. I'll see you on June 2nd. Welcome back, everybody, to the Nutritional Revolution podcast. We have for you guys returning guest, Adam Kimble. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Kyla.
Yeah.
It's great to be back. Great to be back.
And is this our third pod with you?
It is, yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah.
We will link the other pods in the show notes for the listeners if you guys want to go back and check those out. It's always a fun convo when we get to chat with Adam. This one's going to be a real fun one. But before we do that, Adam's got another set of two truths and lies for us. So I'm super pumped you remembered to do that. So, and are up to do it a third time. So I'm going to let you break those down for me.
Okay. I thought, just to mix it up this time, I thought this would be cool. So a couple months ago was the 10-year anniversary of when I ran across the US.
Oh, wow.
So I was like, you know what? I'm going to do a Transcon Two Truths and a Lie themed one. So Here are the three. Okay. When I was running across the US, I officiated a wedding.
Oh.
When I was running across the US, I passed somebody going across the U.S. in the opposite direction.
Oh.
And when I was running across the U.S., an entire middle school came out to cheer me on.
Oh. I feel like that probably definitely happened. I hope it did at least. Um,
And you know how I do it. I always I think the best way to do it is
yeah.
the lie is a version of the truth, you know?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, yeah, could you pass somebody going the opposite direction? I think that's possible. Officiating a wedding. If that's true, I so badly want to hear the story behind that. Like, did you like coordinate to be at a certain place, or was one of your friends getting married or something? How much time did that take out of your across the United States? Um, but that also could be very hard to like pass somebody going the opposite direction. Do you have to do the same route, or like how do you determine that?
No, generally, I was trying to break the record at the time and I didn't, but
Mhm,
the typical, both with FKTs and things, I guess this is technically an FKT, the sort of rule of thumb, and you don't have to do this, like the rules
mhm.
don't explicitly state this, but the general rule of thumb is following what the person who has the record did. But when it comes to like crossing the US, you can kind of do whatever you want. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna say that I kind of want the first one to be true because I want to hear that story. So I'm going to say the middle one is the lie, that you did not pass somebody going across the U.S. in the opposite direction, or crossing the U.S. as well in the opposite direction. But we'll find out at the end of the episode from our listeners. We are, for our listeners too, who are maybe listening to this after the fact, we're recording this on May 19th, 2026. And so Adam, you just came off of American River 50 where you crushed, and then and you was that a course record at the Outlands Endurance Race 50K, right?
Yeah, so I ran in like a 6 month, in like a 6 week period. I ran the Badwater Cape Fear 50K, American River 50, and then Outlands 50K.
Wow.
And won all of those. Set course records at the 250Ks, but not American River 50.
Holy smokes.
Yeah.
That's incredible. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. It was a good start to the season, and I was feeling really good.
Yeah.
So yeah,
And then we have Cocodona.
yep.
Do you
That
want
one
to tell us
that
about
yeah, that one
you want
didn't
to tell
go
us
as
about
well.
tell
No,
us about Cocodona?
but this, like, the thing that I love about endurance sports is that they can teach you so many things. And
Yeah.
in this case, for me, it was just a matter of I was going into it knowing that I was a little bit physically compromised, and I didn't
Hmm.
know to what degree that would impact me.
Mm,
And what's interesting is that I think, like, if it had been 100-mile race,
hmm.
I think I probably would have been okay. Because
Hmm.
I was close enough to 100 miles before things started to kind of go off the rails.
Oh yeah.
But in a 250-mile race, it's hard to hide from those kind of
Right.
things. So
Shoot.
yeah, ultimately, I have several issues going on with my hips, and it
Mm,
kind of got to a point where it was really inhibiting me. And what's interesting is that at the time that it was happening, my wife told me, she's like, I saw a look on your face that was kind of like, it's like sometimes if you're in a position where you're fighting through something and trying to overcome it, it's like that looks a certain way, or that is a certain way.
mm,
And my wife has seen that in me many times,
mm.
but in this case, she's like, I just knew this was different. Like, this was just your body wasn't functioning correctly. And there was
Yeah.
no, like, I didn't have to try to battle through what do I do. It was like,
Hmm.
I don't really have a choice.
Yeah.
Um,
Wow.
so it was tough, but it was also, I was glad that I gave it a shot, because I felt
Hmm.
like if things held up, I felt like I could have done something really special there. And
Hmm.
we can get to this later, but I'm going to return to Cocodona because I still believe I can do something really special there.
Yeah.
So hopefully return with a fully healthy body and see what happens.
Yeah. Yeah. With those races in the 6 week window, I mean, and crushing those, and then having Cocodona shortly after, were you feeling any of the hip stuff in the prior races?
So interestingly, no.
Mm,
That was the other thing. I'd had some, like, I've been dealing with these hip issues for a few years now, but it's kind of
mm,
been like on and off. I had a little bit of a flare up before Badwater, which we talked about
uh-huh,
last year.
uh-huh,
But then during the race was okay.
uh-huh,
And then kind of took some time after that race to like reset, and then trained for several months and was feeling good. And I think it's just, you know how it is. There's like, you can reach a certain point where something isn't aggravated, but then if just
Mhm.
the repetitive nature of hours and hours and hours
Yeah.
can finally catch up to you, and I think that's just what happened.
Shoot. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about, I mean, do you want to start with Cocodona and finish with the American River? Or do you want to
Yeah,
go
let's
start
do
with
it.
American River and go the other way?
Yeah, let's start with Cocodona. That's the most recent piece,
Okay.
so yeah.
So having had that volume under your belt going into Cocodona, I mean, were you feeling, do you feel really ready, or did your body feel like it had recovered from those prior races?
Yeah, so I definitely felt like I had recovered, and part of the, like, racing those so closely to the big race
Yeah.
was I was trying I had already been having some like, there were some question marks in my brain about, is my body going to hold up for this? Just because, like I
Mm.
said, the last couple of years and knowing that there's been a lot of ups and downs. And
Mhm.
so I was sort of using those as like a little bit of a litmus test. And I
Mhm.
know it kind of goes both ways, right? Like you can do that. Like it was actually instilling confidence in me because the races were going well. But at the same
Mhm.
time, I also know that that could have also positioned me a little bit worse for Cocodona.
Mm.
And it's hard to tell that. And I've done it. I've experimented with this stuff over the decade plus that I've been running professionally, where sometimes I'll go into a race having not raced anything else for months beforehand. And
Mhm.
sometimes I feel the need to get on a start line and test some things before doing that. And so
Yeah.
I think each situation is different and can depend on what your needs are within that season and that particular race.
Mhm.
But for me, I really wanted to test a few things and see how it held, and then it held well.
Mhm.
But I also was fully aware that American River 50 was like 6 hours and 40 minutes,
Mhm.
knowing that like I would have to go 50 to 60 hours more than that.
Yeah.
Um, there's just no way to simulate that, you know?
Right.
So that was the tough piece. And I did go like, I mentioned this on social media, but in the days leading up to the race, I was kind of waffling back and forth
Mm.
because on one hand, I was like, I feel like I'm going to have to get really lucky for this not to be a problem.
Mm.
So do I even start the race? But, in hindsight, I actually am glad that I started it because it was a good chance to see basically the first 100 miles of the course,
Yeah.
know what to expect for the next time I come there. So, while it was like a tough pill to swallow, not being able to do what I came there to do, it was also a really good learning experience.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, and this was your first Cocodona ever, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
thinking about Cocodona, its terrain, temperatures, distance, when you're doing your races that you've done leading up, are you like you're saying, trialing different things, nutrition, pre-race prep? Like, are you doing anything different that you were wanting to have as a tool for Cocodona that would be different for the shorter distance stuff?
Yeah, I was trying to sort of replicate it how I mean, I was running at different paces than I would have
Hmm.
been during Cocodona, but everything else
Right.
nutritionally, I was trying to do the way I felt I would need to do it during
Hmm.
Cocodona.
Hmm.
So in that respect, I also like I love that too as just like I was like with the athletes that I coach, I was referred to it as a dress rehearsal, right? It's like
Yeah.
doing a race like that is an opportunity for you to spend however many hours replicating what you hope to do for a longer period of time at the next one, right?
Hmm.
And so
Yeah.
so that was the intent too. And all of that stuff went well. I felt like nutritionally I was on point. And
Good.
actually like during Cocodona, um at like energy, everything other than the hips was good.
Mm,
Um
yeah.
and so from that perspective, it's like I'm encouraged by the way the beginning of it went.
Hmm.
And now it's just getting this one thing fixed and then going back and giving it another shot.
Yeah. So talking about running different paces, does that like for the American River 50 versus Cocodona, do you decrease your intake per hour for a slower pace, or are you keeping it high because you know you're going to be out there for that much longer?
Yeah, so great question. I generally for like a longer effort I will decrease the amount, but
Hmm.
my strategy for Cocodona was initially to start at a higher rate and then sort
Hmm.
of taper
Mm,
throughout, both
hmm.
from like a standpoint of knowing that over the course of time it's going to be harder for my gut to continue taking in that much, but
Yeah.
also because the Cocodona course and in hindsight, so after the race, I basically like a few days after the race, I was sitting with a sports medicine doctor at the University of Nevada, Reno, talking about next steps.
Hmm.
And he was asking me questions about the race. And I told him the first, so it's interesting. for a 250-mile race, Cocodona is very runnable, which is
Mhm.
something that is exciting to me. Like that's my style of a really long race.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is that not quite a third, but basically a third of the vert of the entire race is in the first 50K.
Oh.
So you climb 10,000 feet in the first 50K of the race, and there's
Oh
only
boy.
35 or 36,000 feet total for the entire 250.
Oh my
So when
gosh.
I told him that and with the hip stuff, he was like, well, that would have blown up your hips right away. Just the
Mhm.
ascending specifically.
Yeah.
But to get back to your question, part of that too was knowing there was going to be gnarlier terrain. That was another
Right.
reason to increase the carb intake. So I was kind of thinking, to get specific, in my mind, I was thinking like 100 to maybe 120 grams of carbs per hour to
Mhm.
start, and then slowly taper that throughout the race. And probably later on in the race, be in the 60 to 80 range, maybe.
Mm. Mhm.
That was the thought, and
Yeah.
I never got to the 60 to the 80 part.
Shoot.
But it was going well
Yeah.
for the first many hours. So
Nice. And are you doing that like 100 to 120 in American River distance or
yep,
yeah,
yep,
nice.
and usually and I've been doing that like for a while to know, and it's not that I don't never have gut issues, but I've done that enough that I feel I can handle it pretty well.
Yeah.
And so, for me, it's always a mix of gels and like a hydration mix. I usually do a high carb mix so that like it's just always easier for me to drink
Yeah.
a bunch of the carbs than it is to eat them.
Yeah.
And so I'll kind of do gels and drink, but leaning heavier into the drink side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you do like a neutral flavor or do you try and mix things up for like savory versus sweet or what do you go for?
Yeah, I try to keep it neutral or like low flavor if I can, but then
Mhm.
if I'm drinking something that's like a little bit sweeter, then yeah, I try to offset. Actually, sometimes I'll in my like carb mix, I will sometimes throw in like a salt tab or something
Mm.
to like
Yeah.
spice it up a little bit, and that actually helps me.
Nice.
And yeah, it just kind of like makes it feel a little bit different because
Yeah.
over the course of like many hours, the sweetness, as you know, can become a problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I just try to limit that as much as I can.
Do you do anything like I've heard of different athletes doing minty chewing gum or
Mm,
trying to brush their teeth in the middle of a 100
hmm
miler or 250. Um I've heard like a couple like cool things that people were doing. Those are a couple of them, but I was trying to remember if any others come to mind. But do you do anything like that to help like the palate and I don't
Yeah,
know, just like the teeth feeling?
yeah, the brushing the teeth is a great idea.
Mhm.
And then I actually the chewing gum thing too. There's a gum that I will use specifically in races like this called Run
Mm.
Gum. I think it was
Oh yeah.
actually. Have you heard of it? Yeah.
Hmm.
I think it was started by Nick Simmons, who's a former Olympic runner. But it's just a caffeinated gum.
Yeah.
But it's like mint flavored and does a good job of kind of like cleansing the palate, so to speak,
Nice.
and making it feel a little better. But yeah, I do feel that it's, at least for me, it's important
Hmm.
to kind of like sweep the sugary feeling
Yeah.
away because it can get it can cause some GI distress or just like get in your head like I can't touch anything sweet anymore.
Yeah, for sure. Certainly. Um, with the hydration, so we talked a little bit about carbs per hour. Are you how are you thinking about like fluids and how much you're wanting to target per hour for Cocodona versus like American River?
Yeah, so again, my general rule of thumb is for something that's going to be like so much longer and at a lesser pace,
Hmm.
I usually tone things down from what I would normally do. So,
Hmm.
just purely based on the speed that I'm moving at. When I'm,
Yeah.
running a 50-mile race, I have to be intaking a lot more
Hmm.
salt, liquid, all of it. And actually, American River 50 was a kind of like sneaky hot day, which historically for me, those have been the days that I've handled the worst because,
Oh.
like, for example, when I run a Badwater or a Western States or like a desert race, in my head, I'm like, this is going to be scorching hot.
Mm.
You've got to absolutely be ready for this. When it's
Yeah.
like 80 to 85 degrees and it's hot, but you weren't really like thinking it was going to be quite that hot, those are
Yeah.
the days, it's like those are the days that catch me off guard. So
Shoot.
so I actually in like the second third of AR50, I had like not full on cramping, but like the
Mm,
muscles were starting to tense up a little bit.
yeah.
And so I had to sort of overcorrect, get in more salt than I had been
Mm,
taking, got back to like a good baseline, and then maintained it from there.
yeah.
But yeah, generally for me, I'm kind of like, depending on if it's like a hotter race, I'm like over a liter an hour of
Mm,
water, like up
mhm.
40-ish ounces usually.
Yeah.
But Cocodona, actually, the beginning of the race was weirdly cool. That
Mm,
race, that race it's been different in different years, but typically it's pretty warm the first day.
yeah.
And this year was like great. It was like cloud cover. It was great.
Nice.
So I was able to intake a little bit less than normal. But yeah, I think for me, even if I'm taking in less, like being around a liter an hour is usually pretty good for me.
Yeah, yeah. Do you, like, in preparation, do you do any hyperhydration, like, that morning or the day before at all?
I tried to do the day before. I
Mm,
was pre-hydrating the day before is my like go-to. I
mhm,
mainly like in the morning of, usually like a few hours before the race, I'll try to
mhm.
like take in a bunch. I just don't want to get to the start line where I feel like I have to like pee right then, you know?
Yeah.
But I do the day, like the couple days before, I'm just
Mhm.
like fluids, fluids, fluids. Cause
Yeah.
I always feel like the way I think of it is you're going into this thing, and if you're like already topped off at a really good spot, then it's going to take you a lot longer to get to a bad spot.
Right.
So that's sort of the mentality I take into that.
Delay the dehydration. Do you
Yeah,
add any salt the day before too?
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Nice.
I do. Yeah.
Um, there I just saw at a conference there was a new, like, hyperhydration protocol that they're shifting towards. It was in cycling, but endurance cycling.
Yep.
I feel like it could work for runners too. It was, shifting to the morning because they were saying when they were having athletes do it the day before that they were peeing too much of that fluid volume out.
Oh, interesting.
And so they were having them do, it was 20 to 25 milliliters per kg fluid with 3,000 to 5,000 milligrams of sodium 2 to 3
Really?
hours before start. Yeah, like, I
Okay.
think they said it increased blood plasma volume by 40% or something crazy, like.
Whoa,
Mhm.
that's really
Um,
fascinating.
yeah, so and it's like 3,000 milligrams of sodium in, like, a liter for most people, like, when you do the math, or a
Yeah.
little over a liter.
Yeah.
Um but I think, like, I've had a few of my athletes test it, and it seems like it didn't increase the pee output because the sodium was so high.
Oh, okay.
So,
Yeah. So I haven't done that before. That's fascinating.
yeah, I would test it. I'd love to hear if you
Yeah.
test it.
Also, to your point, cycling has like historically kind of been the predecessor to
Right.
like ultra running, that like
Yes.
it feels like they test all the stuff when it works, then it trickles down to our sport. So
Totally.
yeah,
Yes. Yeah, there's not like it's yeah, you're totally right. Like the Tour, like Tour de France, right? Is like that's kind of where a lot of this I think started, and then
yeah,
yeah, it's evolving. So, but I
yeah.
did have one of my runners, he tested it on race day. I told him not to test it on race day. Did it anyways.
Did it work?
But all that to say is he came back to me and he shaved like an hour and 45 minutes off his prior race time. Yeah.
Nice,
I thought he was
nice.
going to say like 14 minutes or something. He said an hour and 40 minutes. I was like, all right, you go. He was a very heavy sweater too. So hyperhydration worked really well for him. But
Yeah, I'm also a pretty heavy sweater, and that's something that like I would try that on race day. Like I'm usually like don't mess with new things, but because
yeah.
I take in like especially in these races, I take in a lot of salt. That's
Yeah.
something that I would feel comfortable doing because I it would be fine for me.
Yeah.
So, but it sounds
For our
like
listeners, don't try it first thing on race day. Test it in a race simulation or a dress rehearsal.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but
That's great
certainly,
though.
yeah, for Cocodona. So yeah, so thinking about Cocodona, like something that is multiple days, like carb loading. Are you like you're going through that? Like, yeah. I mean, if you did do it, if you did carb load, do you try and carb load for something like that?
Yeah, again, a little bit different than I normally would because it's more
Hmm.
like it's just such a longer thing that in my
Hmm.
mind you've got to make a lot of more like in race
Hmm.
adjustments than
Hmm.
you might otherwise. So yeah, my mentality was like I'm gonna carb load, maybe not to the degree that I normally would, and then
Hmm.
just focus on making smart decisions within the race.
Yeah.
um, because it just feels like it's all about just like trying to keep things as even keeled as you can
Right.
and slow burn for a very, very long time.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
How do you think about, like, sipping in eating? Or I mean, you get some of your calories, right, from your drink mix, but are you trying to sip every 10 minutes, or, like, what's your protocol when you're out there?
Yeah, so, even when I'm, like, focusing mostly on hydration for calories, I'm still trying to eat something, like, every 30 minutes,
Mhm.
whether it's a gel or something else, and then, yeah, sipping every 5 to 10 minutes,
Nice.
and just trying to keep it as constant as possible. Yeah, again, I just feel for stuff this long, I feel like the best thing that you can do is to try to maintain just a steady intake.
Mhm.
And so that was my mentality, was just never have any valleys, just be constantly trying to keep yourself at a certain level throughout the entire thing.
Yeah, certainly. Did you get to a point at all in Cocodona where you needed to do any, like, external cooling stuff?
Not really.
Okay.
Again, it totally, like, I was totally prepared for that,
Yeah.
and did quite a bit of heat training leading into the race, and then
Mhm.
it ended
Mm.
up being like really cool that first day.
Yeah.
Um, and so didn't have to use ice at all.
Mm.
There was a little bit. There was actually one in that first. So in the first 76 miles, you only see your crew twice, and
Wow.
the second time is at mile 76. So from the start,
Gosh.
you see them at mile 30, like 5, and then you don't
Wow.
see them again until 76. And so in those two sections, particularly the first section, there was one stretch where even though like the cloud cover was good, it was just had been like a long time. And they actually, it's funny, there's a at one point there's a at different points on the course, they have a water capacity mandate where they say you have to have the capacity to carry this, but then at two points they make sure that you are actually carrying that amount of water, and the
Oh,
capacity is 4 liters, which is like so much water. But
wow.
what's funny is that in both of the spots where they had us leave with 4, I ran out of like close to the aid, but I ran out of water both times. So
Oh,
it's just like long stretches with a lot of
yeah.
climbing, so slow. And then if it had been hot, I mean, I would have like run out faster, you know.
Yeah.
So
Holy smokes.
yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking when you said one aid all the way, or one crew visit. Yeah, so you're starting out with 4 liters at the start line to that crew section?
So they at the start line, you just had to have the capacity. So I didn't actually. I no, I did start with 4 liters. So
Mm.
I told, because I think it's like mile 7. That's where
Mhm.
they make you. There's from mile 7 to where there's like a huge stretch, and
Mm.
that's where they make you carry the 4 liters. But I just thought to myself, it's 7 miles. I'll be carrying a little more weight, but then when I get to the 8, I won't have to be messing around with all my bottles. They'll just already be
Mm.
filled. So I
Yeah.
got there. I refilled the 2 that I had been holding,
Mm.
and then everything else was full. And then I went from there,
Wow.
and I kind of in my head I was like, I think this is excessive, and then it turned out not to be.
Oh,
For me at
boy.
least.
Yeah, that's
For
good.
for somebody else that maybe doesn't drink or sweat as much as I do, they might have been
Right.
okay, but for me I needed it.
Gosh.
Yeah.
So what is like so you said you were targeting a liter an hour. So what is the time from like that 35-mile crew to when you see him again at 76? How long is
Yeah.
that taking you?
Yeah. So I think I got to the 35 in 6 and change hours,
Wow.
and then
Yeah.
it was another like 5 or 6 until I saw them again at
Wow.
that 70-mile mark. So, um yeah, because it was actually maybe even a little more than that. I think I got into the 76-mile aid station. Race started at 5 a.m. I think it was maybe 7 or 8 p.m. at mile
Wow.
76.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's when you extrapolate it out, you're like, oh, actually, it does make sense. And
Yeah.
there were some aid stations, non-crewed aid stations within there,
Gotcha.
and then a couple water stops as well.
Yeah.
But the water stops, they had limits on the amount that you could take so that they didn't run out. So like there was a couple times that like had there not been a limit, I would have taken more water at those stops, you know?
Right.
Um but
Do
now
you
but
ever
it
have to Oh, sorry. Do you ever have to pull from like streams, or are there streams out there? I don't know.
there I don't know if there weren't streams this year. In years where there's like more precipitation, maybe. But yeah, there was
Jeez.
no option for that this time. But yeah, thankfully the cloud cover helped us a bit. So
Right. That yeah. If someone needs to invent a way to make water not weigh as much, And
Yeah,
then we
yeah,
like will really
yeah,
have some
exactly.
performance advantages.
And that's what's it's funny both for this race and I think we've talked about this before, but I do some race directing for a stage
Mm,
race company, like the multi-day stuff.
yeah.
And one of the things that people don't think about as much is, especially when they're training, is
Hmm.
how heavy your pack is going to be when it's fully filled
Right.
with water. It's like you got all your stuff, yeah, but if you're like maxed out on water, that's like significantly heavier, you know.
Right.
Um, so
How much do you
it's
think it weighed
yeah,
with?
good question. I actually don't know, but thankfully I do some like weight vest training and hiking, and I also from these stage races, I'm used to carrying a pack that's got like way more weight in it, you know.
Good.
So
Yes.
I think that helps. Like people that haven't done that kind of stuff, it can be alarming how heavy it is,
Totally.
you know.
Yeah.
So that's a good recommendation. Is if somebody out there is listening to this and you're going to do a 200-mile race or whatever, just make sure that you're used to what the pack feels like with everything in it.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. Gosh. So, okay. So you mentioned getting into the 76 mile mark, and it was, I think you said 6 or 7 p.m. Makes me think of caffeine.
Mm,
Were you planning on taking caffeine, and how are you going to time that for something like Cocodona that's 250 miles?
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yes, definitely planning on taking it. I did what I always do and do a little caffeine taper leading into the
Mm.
race. I
Hmm.
usually just do a week. So
Hmm.
like really the only caffeine that I get on a daily basis is coffee.
Yeah.
And so I just start drinking and interestingly, like it's funny, some coffee drinkers that I talk to, if they like they just won't drink decaf. Um, but like for I like actually I don't care.
Yeah.
I just love the ritual of drinking coffee and
Hmm.
the taste of it. And so I just switched to decaf for like a week, sometimes
Yeah.
more, but usually just like a week before the race. And then I like to have that kind of like it feels like I've kind of again like cleansed the palate.
Hmm.
And then when I take it during the race, I feel a significant difference. Like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
this is really helping. So I told myself I was gonna wait till like I told myself I would take a little bit of caffeine on the first day, but like limit it pretty good.
Hmm.
So I had a little bit of Coke
Mm.
and I think one or two caffeinated gels
Mm. Hmm.
that had like I'm trying to remember how much 40 milligrams or 50 milligrams of caffeine, something like that.
Okay. That's not so
Um,
bad.
and did that in the first like 12 to 14 hours.
Hmm.
And then once it got to like nighttime, middle of the night, then I was like, okay, I'm gonna start taking like a little bit more when I need it, but still not do too
Yeah.
much. And then my plan was, had I gotten to like fully into the second day, I
Hmm.
was gonna again try to limit it during the day. And then
Mm.
the second night, my strategy was going to be to like really hammer caffeine
Yeah.
and then like just like try to make a strong push through that second night and then continue taking as much as I needed to get to the finish line because
Yeah.
my hope was so the winner of the race this year Rachel Entrekin
Hmm.
ran 56 and change hours
Wow.
and I knew it was ambitious, but I felt like mid 50s was definitely doable if I ran the right
Mm.
race. So in my mind, I was thinking I'm finishing on Wednesday, and so it's like so Tuesday night, just hammer it,
Yes.
and then get through to Wednesday, and then get to the finish line and be done.
Wow.
So yeah.
Gosh. And what products are you liking for caffeine aside from the run gum?
Yeah, so run gum, soda, Coke,
Hmm.
and then the caffeinated gels that I typically use are Morton. I like those
Oh yeah.
ones. So those were the
Nice.
main sources. And then I was also like, you know what, if I need I'm not like an energy drink guy, but I was like, if I need a Red Bull or something here or
Hmm.
there, I'll take it. And actually one of the things I like about the run gum is that it has taurine in it too, not just
Yeah.
caffeine. And in my experience from like the multi-day stuff,
Mm.
taurine has been helpful for, energy and like focus when you're really tired.
Yes, yes. I was at a sports nutrition conference last week, and there was a company, I think it was Science and Sport, has now also a run gum,
Yep.
or sorry, a caffeinated gum. They gave me some samples. I haven't tested it yet, but it's 100 milligrams per one piece of gum, and I think it's
Whoa.
50 milligrams per two pieces of gum for run gum, right?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
yeah,
it's a
I'm
lot.
curious to try it. Yeah,
Yeah.
it'll be a banger.
Yeah, totally.
Were you trying to do a certain like milligram per kilo dose of caffeine, or was it kind of like more how I feel, I'll use it
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
try and
I've never actually been maybe that's something I should look into, but I've never actually been specific with the caffeine intake. It's more just been
Mhm.
like, I need caffeine now. Let's
Yeah.
take a dose, you know?
Yes.
But yeah, that might be something that I should look into more because, uh, again, it's like my rule of thumb is, um, it's especially with a multi-day thing, you're going to
Mhm.
need it so much more later into the race. And so I
Mhm.
don't want to create this like numbing effect of taking
Right.
it early and then it not working when I
Yeah.
need it to work. So
Totally.
so it's delayed gratification
Yeah.
to make it more effective later in the race.
For sure.
Yeah.
Did you have any sort of like, were you gonna try and sleep at all in Cocodona, like through
Yeah.
Cocodona?
Yeah, that's the thing that, and again, assuming I head back next year,
Yeah.
I'm like fascinated by this aspect of it because it's like even the people that so this is like another encouraging thing to me is I forget it was either like the first 8 or the first 10 finishers, overall finishers in the race had all done the race before.
Mm.
So it just lends itself to like these type of
Yeah.
races, like you learn so much that the
Right.
people that have done it multiple times, like the first place male finisher,
Mm.
this was his fourth time running the race.
Oh, wow.
So it's like, yeah, there's just so much to be gleaned and
Yeah.
learned. And anyway, um, so my strategy, and this was based off of what I had heard from other people
Mhm.
anecdotally, and then also based off of my own experience on the Tahoe Rim Trail, because that was 172 miles and it took me
Oh,
37 hours.
yeah.
And
Wow.
I got to like mile 100 or 105. It's a little over 100, and I it was like middle of the night or like middle of the morning, and I felt like that was a good opportunity to try to sleep. So I laid
Yeah.
down for like 10 minutes and just couldn't get to sleep.
Oh, yeah.
And it was like I think it was still a restful 10 minutes, you know?
Yeah.
But I was like, I can't sleep. I gotta get up and go. So
Yeah.
so I that one I laid down but didn't sleep for 10 minutes. And so basically didn't sleep in 37 hours.
Right.
So I in my mind, I was like, I'm going at least 30 hours before I even think about it. And I think probably closer to 40. But I was also gonna see like the other thing that I've learned and that I've heard from a lot of people is if your body is telling you you need to sleep now, then do
Mhm.
it right then.
Mhm.
So I knew trying to plan it out was probably not going to work. So
Mhm.
my strategy was just let's see if I'm feeling like I'm a zombie and I'm not moving well at all. Let's take a little rest and
Yeah.
then go from there. So that was the strategy. It was just wait until the body needs it and do it.
Right.
Yeah.
That totally makes me think too of another like presentation that was at my conference on creatine and sleep, like
Mm,
sleep restriction.
mhm.
Would you utilize creatine like on a multi-day event or like increase the dose on those nights where you're not getting sleep?
Yeah, so that's another thing that I haven't need to experiment with that I haven't
Yeah.
specifically like during these multi-day events. So I probably will in the lead up to next year do that, like train that.
Yeah.
Because I think that it sounds like that could have a really positive effect. The thing that is like from what again, this is just anecdotally, but the drawback that I've heard is potential GI distress if you
Mm.
do too much of the creatine.
Mhm.
Um, but I'm such a fan. It's funny. I up until like a year ago, I had never used creatine, and then I just kept seeing all the information and the
Yeah.
studies on it. I was like, I feel like I need to do that, and now I'm like, absolutely, everybody should be doing it. You know,
Yeah.
it just seems like there's like no negative to doing it, and it
Right.
can only be helpful.
Yeah.
Um, so I've been using it consistently for the last year or so and really like it, and I think it would be a an interesting thing to try out. So I'm trying
Yeah.
to was there like I think I had heard in some of those studies people were doing like 20 grams. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
For sleep restriction, he was saying 20 to 30
20
grams.
to 30. Yeah. So like I'll take
Yeah.
if it's like a big day for me, I'll take 10 grams. Like
Mhm.
just a normal day would be 5, but if I like am in like a phase where I'm strength training a lot and
Mhm.
feel like it's helpful, I'll take 10. So that would be a significant increase for me.
Yeah.
But it sounds like it could be really effective. So
Right, yeah,
yeah,
and it's acute dosing, right? So, like, you do it for,
right,
like, 2 days,
right,
maybe,
right.
and then and break it was suggesting, like, break it into, like, 10-gram doses, so,
Okay,
like, 10 grams in the morning, 10 grams in the afternoon or evening,
okay,
maybe even if you're doing 30, maybe you're doing 10, 10, 10.
yeah,
But, yeah, he was saying, like, the big component of that dosing when there's sleep restriction is more it's improving the cognitive functioning piece,
Yep.
right? And so yeah, it was really cool how it like could bring back up the brain creatine levels and really fascinating stuff.
Yeah, and it feels like, again, I don't know enough about like the drawbacks, but it feels like if that works, it could be really, really helpful, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So worth exploring for sure.
Yeah, definitely don't test first time on
Yeah,
racing,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Listen.
That's a great example of something I definitely wouldn't test for the first time.
Right. Yes. Yeah. You want to make sure your GI can handle it well. Okay. So we covered caffeine timing, sleep strategies, fluids, carbs. How much of this was or was not potentially different for something like the American River or Outlands 50K? Like any of
Yeah.
that hugely different?
No, not terribly different. Again, just like, I don't know what I would say. Probably like maybe like a 20% reduction in just about everything, fluid, carbs, all that.
Yeah.
And actually, like I said, to start the race, there was no reduction, but then
Mm,
I was planning to really taper it down. But yeah, otherwise, kind of business as usual. And just and I'm also, the other thing is, I don't know if we've talked about this before, Kyla, but for me, it's kind of like the idea of the pre-hydration in the days leading up to it. In the
yeah.
beginning of a race, I tend to overdo it is not the right word, but like I go a little harder earlier with the expectation or the hope that that will set me up better later. Just because like I know myself and I know my body, and if I get behind it all, then that's
Hmm.
way more of a problem.
Totally.
So I try to like get more carbs than I might need or more fluid than I
Hmm.
might need early, and then if I like overdo it a little bit, I can tone that down as opposed to you get behind and it's really hard to catch up.
Yes. Yeah. I remember there was something on like they were talking about hydration versus carbs. Like you could take carbs and your blood glucose will pop up in like 10 minutes. But if you get dehydrated and to fully rehydrate can sometimes take 72 hours. It's insane.
Crazy.
So like getting behind on hydration is yeah, you don't
Yeah.
want to do that.
No, and I always tell my athletes, like, when you're in a low point in a race, if you keep eating and drinking, you can come out of that low point, and you will come out of
Right.
the low point. If you stop eating and drinking, that's like the one guarantee that you're not gonna be able to bounce back, you know?
Right. Yeah. Shoot. Goodness. Okay. Well, with the hip stuff that happened
Yeah.
in Cocodona, what's coming down the pipeline for you? Like what's on the calendar for you the rest of
Yeah.
2026?
Yeah, so, the only thing that I have on my calendar, and it's gonna be dependent on what the next steps are, which I'll get to in a second with the hips,
Hmm.
is the company that I do some race directing for
Mm.
has a, multi-day mountain race in Kyrgyzstan,
Oh, cool.
and I'm signed up for that. That's in July.
Fun.
So it's a 5 stage, like 130 miles over 5 days.
Wow.
Um, and yeah, I haven't been to Kyrgyzstan before, but I've seen the photos and it looks
Yeah.
amazing. The
Oh.
Tian Shan mountain range, for people that are familiar with that, beautiful area of the world. But so that will hopefully be coming up next, but pending what's going on. So I've been meeting with an orthopedic surgeon and getting some testing and stuff done. I have a CT scan coming up, which is kind of the last step.
Mm,
And then once we get the results on that, we're going to see what's next. But it looks like there's a decent chance that I might be getting a hip scope, which is a
mm,
minor arthroscopic surgery done on both hips. And interestingly, there's a fun tie-in here. So there's this friend of mine, Kevin, who interviewed me leading into Cocodona. He did like a
mm,
series where they interviewed a bunch of the runners for the race.
mhm.
And Kevin has done Cocodona before. And he saw, I made a post after the race about what was going on with my body. And he saw it and he reached out and he basically told me he had all of the same things that I had. He had a hip impingement, a femoral acetabular impingement, which is what I have,
Oh,
FAI in both hips, and some micro fractures in the hips too.
oh,
And
wow.
and he had all of that stuff. And he got the procedure that I might be getting done like 10 years ago, and he said he's had no pain since. Um,
Wow.
so that was really encouraging to me. It's like,
Yeah.
surgery is always a big deal, even when it's a minor
Mhm.
surgery. But I've kind of had this like low grade, even when things are good, this low grade
Mm,
pain for a few years now. And so the
mhm.
thought of like potentially getting this done and then running
Yeah.
totally pain free is like really exciting.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
yeah. So that's where I'm
Oh,
at. And I'm like, regardless of what happens, I'm really hopeful.
yeah.
And I think big things are coming, and I still feel like my best running is ahead of me, which is exciting. So
Sweet. Oh
yeah,
my gosh, that's great.
yeah,
That's good to hear though that have feedback from other people who've had similar surgeries. And that was 10 years ago. Medicine has improved so much in 10 years.
totally.
Yeah.
Actually, so if I do get the surgery done, the guy that's gonna do it, So I met with a sports medicine doctor, and he referred me to this orthopedic surgeon. And he goes, just so you know, this guy that I'm referring you to, he's like, I tell all of my athletes at the university, my grandma, and everyone I
Oh,
know, this is the guy that you go see. So
that's
I
awesome.
also have a lot of confidence in the person doing the surgery
Yes.
as well. So
That's amazing. That's always good. Yeah, if he's gonna send a family member there, that's always a good sign.
yeah, totally.
Epic. Okay, well, I'm gonna jump back to your two truths and a lie.
Yes.
So you said, well, these are all about running when you ran across the United States. So that you officiated a wedding at one point when you were running across the United States, that you passed someone going in the opposite direction crossing the United States, and that an entire middle school cheered for you. I thought the passing someone was the lie. Is that right? Were they going
No.
the same direction? Is that what it
Yeah.
was?
All right, so I'll just go in order. So I did officiate a wedding.
Amazing.
My best friend growing up, him and his wife, who was also a good friend of mine growing up,
Oh.
they got married, and the plan was I was supposed to be done with the run across the US, but it took longer than I had
Oh.
hoped.
Yeah.
So we were still out there, and we're like,
Oh,
what is gonna
no.
happen? And so I started in California, we were in Georgia, and they were getting married in Florida.
Oh, wow.
So I finished up one day, and then we got in the crew RV, drove down to Florida.
Oh my gosh.
I officiated the wedding. We stayed overnight, drove back, and then I continued the run across the
Oh my gosh. Wow.
so it took we lost like a day and a half basically
Dang.
on the run. But at that point, the you know, I wasn't going for the record anymore, so it was
Yeah.
like, let's do this, and
Yeah.
it made for a good story later, which was fun. So
Wow. That's great.
then when I was running across the US, there was this woman, I believe her name was Susie. And she was a British woman who was doing a run around the world.
Oh,
But
wow.
she was taking like years and years to do it. So she would like
Whoa.
run and then stop in a place and then do all that. And anyway, she had like this cart of all of her stuff, and she
Whoa.
literally was running across the US in the opposite direction
Oh my
of me.
gosh.
I'm like, what are the chances of that? This is
Yeah.
insane. So
Wow.
that was
So that
crazy.
is true.
That is true.
Okay, so an
Um,
entire middle school didn't cheer for you?
so this is the deviation from the truth, was that the entire middle school wasn't there in person. This was
Oh.
a school called South Middle School in Eau Claire, Wisconsin.
Mm.
They reached out to me before the run, and one of their teachers, her name was Ruth. She
Mm.
was like, "Hey, we're gonna follow your entire run across the U.S. We're gonna like create curriculum around it." So
Oh,
they were talking about
cool.
like the states that I was in and what was happening, like
Amazing.
geography stuff, and then they were doing like math of how long it was going to take me to get here, and
Oh, that's
so they
so
did an entire
cool.
thing around it, and then the students were like, they literally sent me letters, videos, and we were exchanging stuff throughout the entire 2 months that it took me to do it.
That's
And then
amazing.
when I was done, they brought me to Eau Claire, and I spoke to the entire school, so that was really cool too.
Oh, I
Yeah,
love that.
yeah,
That's also so cool of that teacher. Like, I would
yeah.
have loved to be in her class. That sounds
Yeah,
amazing.
it was, yeah, super super cool. So
Wow.
and yeah, she was amazing, and the whole staff and the students
Yeah.
were awesome. So that was a really cool. There was like all kinds of incredible connections with people. Like when I
Mhm.
was running, it really did feel Forrest Gump-esque.
Oh.
And actually for people that didn't know me or didn't know that I did this, at the time that I was running across the US, my hair was super long and I had a huge beard. So we actually filmed the Forrest Gump spoof, which was a
That's
lot of
great.
fun. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And my friends that do video stuff did a great job with that.
Oh, that's great.
But there were so many points across the country when people were coming out and running with me, and it was just like an incredible experience. So
That's so cool.
yeah.
Wow. Okay, well, those are really fun stories. Where can our listeners find you and follow you?
Yes. So on socials, particularly Instagram, Adam Kimble 818, and then my website, adamkimble.com, is a great place to reach out if you need to get in touch for any reason.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we will link both of those in the show notes for the listeners so you guys can go
Awesome.
follow Adam. Are you taking on any clients for coaching, or are you maxed out?
I am. I'm actually coaching more people than I ever have right now, but
Ugh,
my rule of thumb is like a friend of a friend. I can always make space. So,
yeah,
so yeah, if somebody reaches out through the show, I'm always happy to collaborate.
sweet.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you again so much for your time, Adam. This is always, like I said, so fun and so informative.
Yes. Thank you, Kyla. I always have a blast. So thanks for having me back on.
To stay up to date with the Nutritional Revolution recent activities, follow Nutritional Revolution on Instagram and Facebook, and sign up to receive the Nutritional Revolution newsletters on the Nutritional Revolution website. If you guys enjoyed today's content, please hit subscribe below to stay up to date on the latest Nutritional Revolution posts. Have a healthy day.